The time is now for the Dr. Bob Sports Podcast. I am Tanner. I am our head of analytics. And for the past 7 years, I've been working alongside Bob, originating our NFL and college basketball bets. And today, as always, I'm joined by our digital media specialist, Grant. Only 2 podcasts left. Been a hell of a run. Nearly 200 days since our first recording back around that MLB All-Star game.
Yeah, that is insane to think about. I mean, this has just been flying. This has been so much fun. I think it's been a great first year of the podcast. Gained a lot of new listeners, hopefully taught a lot of people about sports betting and the NFL. But let's talk about this weekend. I mean, we only have 3 football games left for the year, and we're going to switch up the format a little bit this week, and we're going to do just a full game preview of the AFC Championship and NFC Championship. So let's start with that Chiefs versus Ravens game. The Chiefs are entering their 6th straight AFC Championship game, but the Ravens are favorites here, and they're coming off of a very solid win over the Texans, and they are getting incredible play from their soon-to-be MVP quarterback. What'd you take away from that game last week?
Well, I mean, the Ravens scored 24 unanswered points in the second half. And I think, it's been highly publicized, but it really came due to a schematic change they made at halftime. So D'Amico Ryans, who didn't blitz at all, basically this year, one of the lowest blitz rates in the league, came out and said, if we're going to beat Lamar Jackson, we've got to up the variance. And he came out and the Texans had a 75% blitz rate. And that, the Ravens did not take that in stride initially. In fact, Lamar averaged negative 0.27 EPA per play against the blitz in the first half. But they made a huge change to get the ball out of Lamar's hands quicker at halftime. So Lamar's time to throw in the first half was 3.36 seconds. And his time to throw in the second half was only 2.02 seconds. So, a 1.2 seconds faster getting the ball out of his hands. And he raised his EPA per play to 0.72. It's almost one EPA, adding 1 extra point per play more than he was in the first half against the blitz. And getting the ball out faster made a huge difference for the Texans pass rush as well, because they had a 43% sack rate on blitzes in the first half and no sacks on Jackson in the second half. And, overall this season, it hasn't been a huge problem for Lamar against the blitz, at least compared to the years past. So Lamar had just a 1.3% PFF turnover-worthy play rate against the blitz this year, compared to 3.2% in the 3 seasons prior. So Todd Monken, new offensive coordinator, has helped him in that department, but they needed to make a big change at halftime last week, and it really worked out for them.
Yeah, what have the Chiefs done in prior years when playing Lamar to contain him? Have they had success doing that?
Well, these teams haven't played since 2021, so we haven't got a recent matchup. It's kind of wild that they didn't play in either of the last 2 regular seasons. So we look back at that 2021 Week 2 matchup, and Steve Spagnuolo dialed up a 44% blitz rate. That's just how our defensive coordinators have been trying to attack Lamar for the past few years, but Lamar used his legs to run around the blitzes. Basically, he'd look for a little hole in the pass rush, sprint out, and he had 16 carries for 107 yards in that game. And ultimately, Kansas City's defense surrendered a 62% pressure rate, and that was the highest they would go on to surrender the entire 2021 season. So I think Spags will be looking for a new game plan on Sunday.
So Spags isn't going to blitz this time around. What do you think the Chiefs are going to do?
I think we could see them go all the way back to the very initial game plans defenses put together to stop Lamar. And that was putting more defensive backs on the field to make sure that he doesn't get outside and scramble you to death. And we saw, Lamar's first ever playoff game, the Chargers had a 98% dime defense rate in 2019. And then the Titans copied that game plan to some extent and ran about half their plays in dime when they beat Baltimore in 2020 in that playoff game. So we saw the Chiefs get gashed by quarterback runs last week. Josh Allen had 12 runs for 72 yards, 100% success rate on those runs. So I think Spags might load the box, right? So still put a ton of guys at the line of scrimmage, but not use as many linebackers because, Lamar is faster than linebackers. So if you want to stop Lamar from running, you need defensive backs on the field.
Yeah, it sounds like the Chiefs are going to try and get more speed on the field, especially with Willie Gay banged up here.
Yeah, so I mean, the Chiefs are already, nursing injuries with one linebacker anyway. So we get more speed on the field, more defensive backs, and I think you can press if you have more defensive backs on the field, which is already a strength of the Chiefs, right? They have the second highest press coverage rate in the league, and I think that they'll use a lot of press coverage with too high behind it because I don't think they're going to want to ask too much of third string safety Shamari Connor with starting safety Mike Edwards likely sidelined. So you can see they probably wouldn't want to play a whole ton of single high with Shamari Connor being the only guy between a deep pass in the end zone. Now, Connor did play well last week. He actually had 77 snaps, which led all defenders in the divisional round, but the Bills really didn't test him, which was a big surprise. The Bills only had 4 passes more than 15 yards downfield in the divisional round, and Kansas City's defense in general doesn't play a lot of single high anyways. In fact, they led the NFL with 2 high safeties on a league high 63% of snaps.
All right, so the Chiefs are playing a lot of too high. What are the Ravens going to look to exploit here on offense?
Well, we talked about, 2 high safeties, a lot of lighter personnel, cover 2, kind of press man. That's what we think that Spags is going to go with here. I mean, if they show that, the Ravens are going to put a lot of big bodies on the field, especially getting back tight end Mark Andrews, who was 5th in yards per route run before going out in mid-November, because Isaiah Likely, the backup tight end, was great in his absence. He had 10 explosive plays since week 12. That's 4th among tight ends. So now you could put Likely and Andrews on the field.
Yeah, I think Ravens fans are probably salivating after watching how the Bills ran the ball over the Chiefs last week.
Yeah, and ultimately I think Spags was okay with that, right? They won the game, letting the Bills run all over them and not letting the Bills do any of the deep passing. So, I mean, Buffalo's offense had a 56% rush success rate when they added an extra offensive lineman last week, right? So when they got into the heavier personnel we're talking about. And just to go back to the 2 tight end thing, I mean, Todd Monken is very familiar with running 2 tight ends. When he was Georgia's offensive coordinator from 2020 to 2022, Georgia had a 44% 12 personnel rate. That was 4th highest in the nation, and that's with 2 tight ends on the field. So I think we could see a lot of formations with Andrews and Likely out there. And then we could also see them get into 22 personnel, just 2 tight ends, 2 running backs, because Baltimore fullback Patrick Ricard played a season-high 37 snaps last week. And I mean, if the Chiefs aren't going to play with as many linebackers to prevent Jackson from getting on the outside running, these heavier packages are going to be there for the Ravens. They could play with a fullback, running back, and 2 tight ends, and that would mean that it's a rotating cast at wide receiver from Zay Flowers, Rashad Bateman, Odell, and Nelson Aguilar.
Yeah, it sounds like the Ravens are going to be able to run all over the Chiefs if Spags wants to truly contain Lamar, but as a Chiefs fan, I would rather prefer the ball in Gus Edwards' hands, but I don't know, it might get a little frustrating watching them just run it down our throat all day.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right on that. You'd rather Gus Edwards pound it for 6 yards a pop than Lamar get an explosive play out there. And then you just got to hope that the Ravens offense, gets stuffed on one of these runs on first down. There's a holding call. A lot can go wrong when you're counting on 10-play drives. So I think that's what Spags is going to do. He's going to make sure that Lamar doesn't beat them on the ground. And the Ravens might be content to take that, right? I mean, last week we saw them, they had 229 rushing yards, and they had 343 shotgun runs this year. That's second most in the NFL, and the Chiefs are surrendering 5.1 yards per rush when opponents are in shotgun. So I think it's just a great matchup for the Ravens ground game, especially if the Chiefs use lighter personnel to contain Lamar's running. So it could be a healthy dose of Gus Edwards, Justice Hill, maybe even some Dalvin Cook. I mean, it's just going to be pounding the rock for the Ravens this week.
All right, well, let's shift it over to the Chiefs offense. And they were not special in the regular season, but it looks like they turned it on for the playoffs here.
Yeah, it's only punted once. Last week in Buffalo, Patrick Mahomes averaged 9.4 yards per pass play against the Bills. So they are absolutely turning it on.
Yeah, and I think a big reason for a lot of success has been the O-line was playing incredible, but there's kind of a big injury there right now.
Yeah, and so the Chiefs' interior offensive line is the strength of this offense outside of Patrick Mahomes. And we talked about that last week, how the interior is responsible for only 34% of the pressure, second fewest in the league. And they did end up shutting down Ed Oliver and Daquan Jones. Like we said, neither of those defensive tackles had a pressure last week. And Joe Thuney, all-pro left guard, was a big reason for that. He contained Oliver to 0 pressures, and that was Oliver's first 0 pressure game in the last 2.5 seasons. But now Thuney is going to be out this game. And, you lose an all-pro, that's usually a pretty huge loss. But Chiefs backup Nick Allegretti has conceded just 1 pressure in 52 pass blocking snaps this year. So he hasn't been terrible filling in, but it's going to be a tough matchup for Allegretti this week across from Ravens interior defender Justin Matabuke, who ranks 7th in pass rushing efficiency.
So if Mahomes has less time in the pocket this week, where are we expecting him to get the ball out quick?
I think it'll depend on the coverage. So the first thing you look at in the Chiefs offense is the tight ends. The Chiefs target tight ends at the 4th highest rate in the league, but the Ravens might deploy all-pro safety Kyle Hamilton on Travis Kelce. I could see Mike McDonald doing that. In the regular season, the Ravens are surrendering 0.3 more EPA per target to tight ends than running backs and 0.16 more EPA per target to tight ends than wide receivers. So there still could be a good matchup for tight ends, even if Hamilton's on Kelce. It just might be Noah Gray out there. And we've seen the Chiefs put more tight ends on the field a lot recently. The Chiefs' 2 highest 13 personnel rates of the season have come in these last 2 playoff games. And Kansas City's offense had a 64% success rate in 13 personnel last week. So we could see Noah Gray out there more. And I think that Andy Reid will want to get his heavy personnel in there to coax the Ravens into using third linebacker Malik Harrison in favor of having both safeties, Kyle Hamilton, who we talked about, and Geno Stone out there, because Stone had 7 interceptions this year, 2nd in the NFL. And the Ravens have so much depth in that secondary that the Chiefs will want to make them use more linebackers and put heavy bodies on the field.
Yeah, and Rashee Rice has had an absolute breakout year, but how's his matchup for this week?
Well, yeah, Rice 14th in EPA per target this year, and he could have a favorable matchup on the inside if Kyle Hamilton is covering Kelce. So Hamilton is he's played a lot of nickelback this year, but when it's not Hamilton at nickelback, it's been Arthur Millette. And Hamilton has conceded 0.99 yards per cover snap in the slot, fewer than Millette. So it's a lot better for the Ravens when Hamilton is guarding slot receivers than Millette. But the Ravens are getting back Marlon Humphrey this week. And like you said, Rashee Rice has really been the breakout guy for this Chiefs receiving corps. And so the Ravens might just shadow Rice with Marlon Humphrey, who conceded only 0.66 yards per cover snap this season. That's 5th in the NFL. He was out these last 2 games with a calf strain, but it looks like he will be back. So we could see McDonald, put Hamilton on Kelce, Humphrey on Rice, and Mahomes going to have to go elsewhere with the ball.
Yeah, this is truly going to be a chess match, and I think this is 2 teams that know how to step up in these big moments.
But the Ravens have an average point differential of plus 13.8 in the 10 games versus playoff teams this year after crushing the Texans last week. But Mahomes could step up as well. I mean, so let's just look at Mahomes' career, right? He leads the league, averaging 0.27 EPA per play in the regular season. But it rises to 0.31 EPA per play in the postseason, which works out to 1.7 points better per game against better defenses, right? He's in the playoffs, and Mahomes is 8-3 outright in his career as an underdog. So you can never count out Mahomes, even though the Ravens have shown the ability to step up in class as well.
All right, well, let's look at the weather here. Is there anything that you're concerned about for this week?
Well, this would be the weather game. The chances of rain have continued to increase as the week goes on, and I think John Harbaugh is going to be praying that it's an absolute downpour, right? That would limit Mahomes' edge in the passing game. The conditions are currently projected to be 3.4 points worse than an average NFL game by our numbers. So it comes out to our model makes Baltimore a 3.8 point favorite with a predicted total of 44.6.
All right, so not much value here on the side or total, but you got a prop for us for this one?
Yeah, so my prop for this game, I'm taking Noah Gray at 35-1 for first touchdown score. And we talked about how the Chiefs will want to use heavier personnel to not allow the Ravens to deploy all the guys in that deep secondary they have, especially with Humphrey back. The Chiefs' two highest 13 personnel rates of the season have come in the last two games versus Miami and Buffalo. So I think Gray is going to be on the field way more than usual. And then we talked about we could see Baltimore defensive coordinator Mike McDonald put Kyle Hamilton in coverage on Kelsey. They could shadow Rashee Rice with Marlon Humphrey coming back. So Mahomes has to go somewhere with the ball in the red zone, and Noah Gray is a huge target at 6'3", 240 pounds. I'd love Noah Gray at 35-1 for first touchdown score.
I love that pick. That's a fun one. But let's switch it over here to our NFC preview, and we just released a bet to clients, actually.
Yeah, so we sent out a strong opinion on San Francisco -7 Thursday morning, just before we were recording this podcast. It looks like it's out to 7.5 right now, so that's out of range. We think this is a slightly above 54% bet, and -7.5 is almost 3% worse than -7, just given your push probability on 7 there. So you would be dropping below break even to beat the VIG if you played 7.5. So I would not play that. But if you shop around, you might be able to find a -7, -115, and that is the constraint that we put on this strong opinion.
All right, well, let's get into it. The Lions are in their first NFC Championship since 1992, and they have solidified themselves as America's team. But they are facing this 49ers team that's playing in their third straight NFC Championship. After the Packers game last week, I think the Lions fans feel like they've got a real shot to win now. But what'd you take away from that rainy day in Santa Clara?
Well, Brock Purdy averaged 6.1 yards per pass play last week. It looked like it could have been a little bit worse, but he did put together that final drive and finished at 6.1. In those rainy conditions, 3.5 points worse than average, according to our metrics, and the 49ers did narrowly advance. I mean, their win probability was as low as 20% against the Packers, and it wasn't Purdy's first time struggling in wet conditions this season. He averaged only 3.6 yards per pass play in a rainy Cleveland back in week 6. But then you look at all the games that Purdy has played that he hasn't had to deal with the rain, and he's averaged 9.1 yards per pass play in his other 15 starts this year. And I expect Kyle Shanahan to not be fazed by last week's shakiness, given the favorable passing matchup and basically perfect weather for an outdoor game. It doesn't get any, if you're having an outdoor game on grass, this is as high as scoring conditions as we can grade a game going into this week, because it's going to be, mid 60s and no wind in Santa Clara on Sunday night.
All right, well, the 49ers are known for their run game, but it sounds like you aren't really expecting them to lean into that too much.
Yeah, so, I mean, you look at it, Detroit's defense is 4th in EPA per rush allowed. So I don't really think that they're going to spend too much time slamming their heads into this. Detroit defense has made a priority to stop the run at the expense of their pass defense. So the Lions finished 25th in EPA per dropback this year, and we thought it might get a little bit better when they got starting safety C.J. Gardner-Johnson back in week 18, but it hasn't. It's gotten worse. They've surrendered 0.18 EPA per dropback since week 18.
All right, well, the status of wide receiver Deebo Samuel is yet to be determined as we're recording this, but how does that impact the offense if he is in or out?
So San Francisco's offense averaged 1.4 more yards per play with Deebo on the field this season than when he was sidelined. So you look at that, that's pretty huge. But those numbers are conflated because, you remember back, All-Pro left tackle Trent Williams was out for much of Deebo's absence. So you can break it down into smaller samples and see that the 49ers averaged 0.2 EPA per play more with Williams on the field and Samuel sidelined compared to having neither of them out there. So, a huge difference just with Williams. They were fine with just Williams and not Samuel. But they were still worse with Williams on the field and Samuel sidelined than they were with both of them on the field. They're about 0.1 EPA per play worse. So Samuel is worth something, but it's not as crazy as everyone's, numbers that you might see online this week with Deebo out this season.
So if Deebo is out, how much is he worth, and what are they going to change with the game plan?
So if he is out, he's worth 1.4 points by our metrics. But I expect him to be on the field this week in some capacity with the sore left shoulder. I would say he's got a 75, 80-ish% chance to play as we record this on Thursday afternoon. However, Kyle Shanahan's game plan likely won't feature him heavily because his status was not fully known early in the week when Shanahan would have been putting that game plan together. So I don't think we're going to get a heavy dose of Debo, but I do think he'll be on the field. So enter Brandon Ayuk, who led all wide receivers this season, averaging 0.8 EPA per target. And Ayuk is going to be lining up across from Cameron Sutton, who surrendered 12.5 yards per target last week to Mike Evans. And I think this is going to be a huge game for Brandon Ayuk.
Yeah, Lion fans on Twitter do not like Sutton, but the one guy that they do love, and I guarantee you this, is Aiden Hutchinson. That guy's been a menace all year long. Should we expect the same this week?
Yeah, I mean, he's coming off a league-leading 16th game with at least 5 pressures this year, and he will be having a favorable matchup lined up across from 49ers right tackle Colton McKivitz, who ranks 53rd in pass blocking efficiency out of 57 qualifying tackles. And I think that this is going to be so vital for Shanahan to shut down. He'll be so worried about Hutchinson versus McKivitz that he's going to have George Kittle chip a ton on Hutchinson, which, is going to delay Kittle getting out in his routes. But Kittle probably wasn't going to play a massive factor in this game anyways, because Detroit's defense is 7th in EPA per target allowed to tight ends.
All right, so if Kittle and Debo are in question here, where else are the 49ers going to go with the ball?
Well, we talked about Ayuk, but the Lions are also one of 12 defenses to allow more than 0 EPA per target to running backs. And the 49ers will want to slow down Aiden Hutchinson in the pass rush with screens to Christian McCaffrey. So you can see if Hutchinson tries to get too far upfield, beating McKivitz, they could just throw a screen right over the top of him. And McCaffrey led running backs, all running backs in the NFL this year with a 56% pass success rate.
All right, well, let's switch it over to the Lions offense. I mean, Jared Goff and Ben Johnson have been such a good duo this year.
Yeah, and they made a living throwing over the middle of the field. Detroit's targeting the middle of the field on 26% of passes. That's the second most in the NFL. And Goff is averaging 13.5 yards per pass play on intermediate middle throws this season. But those are going to be shut down on Sunday night. Everyone knows about all-pro linebacker Fred Warner, but his running mate Dre Greenlaw is also one of the league's best in coverage. Greenlaw conceded a league low 0.63 yards per cover snap last week and had 2 interceptions. And the 49ers defense allowed just a 46% completion rate on intermediate middle throws this season. That was 3rd in the NFL. So, Sam Laporta, that's kind of where he likes to operate. He was 3rd in EPA per target this season, but the 49ers shut down tight ends, as you might expect. They were 4th, allowing just a 45% success rate to tight ends this year. So I don't think that Goff and Ben Johnson are going to be able to operate where they love to target in this matchup.
So if Laporta's going to be shut down here, does that mean it's going to be a big day for the other receivers?
Well, you look at it, it's like, okay, they can't throw in the middle. What do they got going on the outside receiver? And it's not great with Khalif Raymond sidelined. So Lions wide receivers Josh Reynolds and Jamison Williams are combining for 0.73 yards per route run less than Khalif Raymond this year. Now, I know Reynolds caught that touchdown last week, but he gained only 18 yards on his 37 other routes against the Buccaneers. So I think the offense is just going to have to revolve around Amon-Ra St. Brown. He's probably going to have to run more out routes than slants to avoid those 49ers linebackers. But St. Brown, everyone knows he's had a great year, 4th in success rate. He runs 56% of his routes out of the slot. And San Francisco made a change in the middle of the season that really hasn't worked out for them at nickelback. So they bench Isaiah Oliver, who they brought in the offseason during the bye week. And Damador Lamar is surrendering 1.28 yards per cover snap in the slot since becoming the starting nickelback in week 10. That's 5th worst in the NFL. So he's probably going to get torched against St. Brown this week.
Yeah, Amon-Ra has looked like a guy that just can't be stopped no matter who you have on him. But looking at this Lions offensive line, they have all-pro right tackle Penei Sewell to contain Nick Bosa, but does San Francisco's pass rush really have a good shot to get pressure on Goff here?
Well, outside of that matchup that you mentioned, I do think they're going to be able to collapse the pocket with that patented 49ers 4-man pass rush that they love to use, because they've gotten back interior defender Eric Armstead. He missed the final 5 games of the regular season, but he ranked 10th in pass rushing efficiency, and he had 5 pressures against the Packers last week. So when you have Armstead out there, you really have a 4-man monster with Armstead, Hargrave, Bosa, and Chase Young.
Yeah, that is not good considering the state of that Lions interior of the offensive line.
Yeah, I mean, center Frank Ragnow sprained both his knee and ankle. Now, he played through it against the Buccaneers, but he's going to be banged up, and he'll struggle, nursing those two injuries lined up across from Armstead. And then, to make matters worse, left guard Jonah Jackson is out. And the backup guard, Owusu-Sika, surrendered a 25% pressure rate last week, filling in for Jackson, and he is going to struggle mightily across from Javon Hargrave, who had 52 pressures this season, 12th in the NFL.
All right, so where's the model at on this game?
Our model favors the 49ers by 9.2 with a predicted total of 53.6. We like the matchups for the 49ers in this game, so it's going to be a strong opinion at San Francisco -7 over Detroit.
All right. Well, I love that, but do you have a primetime prop for us this week? I mean, we were so close on that Lamar Jackson 12-1 for most rushing yards in the divisional round, but Aaron Jones had to sneak in there and get him by 8 yards.
Yeah, I'm going to leverage the idea this week that weather could end up playing a large role in the AFC Championship and take Brock Purdy to lead all quarterbacks in passing yards at plus 150. So looking at the team totals, the 49ers are projected to score 5 more points than any other team this weekend. And we talked about how Detroit's defense is 4th in EPA per rush allowed and 25th in EPA per dropback allowed. So I think that the 49ers are going to air it out, and Brock Purdy has averaged 9.1 yards per pass play in his 15 starts without rain this season.
I like that one. He's probably priced a little too low right now after last week's game, obviously, but I think
there should be some value there. If he had torched the Packers defense, I mean, just given the difference in all these team totals this week, I think that Purdy would be listed at lower at maybe plus 125, and we're getting him at plus 150 now.
Yeah, I like it. Well, I think that will do it for our conference championship show. I have best of luck to all the fans with your team still in the fight. And don't forget to check out drbobsports.com, where we've also got the college basketball model sending out plays every single day at 9:30 a.m. Eastern. So if you're enjoying the content, please leave us a thumbs up, and we will be back to preview the Super Bowl.